Alright, next I'll be talking about the papillomavirus. Here's how our sketchy brains break down papilloma. We hear pilloma and think of this round pill. Well, round pills aren't very interesting, but round pill bugs could be. You know pill bugs or roly-polies? Well, Brian, our art director, is quite experienced with pill bugs. He loved playing with them when he was younger. In fact, some of his closest friends were pill bugs. So Papilloma will be about some kids hanging out with pill bugs in a park, and the sketch is called The Paloma Bugs. See this little guy on the chair? He's our pill bug. You'll be seeing these little guys pop up all over the picture. So we're going to be focusing on the human papillomavirus, or HPV for short. Members of the papillomavirus family are double-stranded DNA viruses, thus we have the blue overtones in our sketch. Remember, parvovirus is the only fully single-stranded DNA virus we'll talk about, so you know that papilloma here is double-stranded DNA. We're all about making things easy and only illustrating the exceptions. So the virus is also naked, meaning that it doesn't have an envelope, so we've brought in our old friend, the statue of David, and we'll have him sitting here in the park. There are over 100 different types of human papillomavirus, but we only need to memorize 6 of them. Yay! We got off so easy. And to make it even easier, they're named with just numbers. So we're going to help you remember this by using the ages of the various characters in our videos. So let's start over in the back here and you'll see what I mean. We've got these young children and they're 1 and 4 years old. As you can see, they're telling each other how old they are. So this part of the scene is going to be dealing with HPV strains 1 through 4. Notice they have these pill bugs all over them. These pill bugs represent the skin lesions of Verruca vulgaris, which is just a fancy word for the cutaneous common wart. So children typically get these types of warts on their hands and feet, but mainly we just want you to know that these aren't the genital wart strains. Transmission of these cutaneous warts requires physical contact, so think about these 2 kids playing and their hands probably touched at some point. So again, we're only using 1 and 4-year-olds here to signify that we're talking about HPV 1 through 4. We're not at all saying only 1 to 4-year-olds get these types of warts. Now here towards the front, we'll draw on 2 more children, a 6-year-old and 11-year-old, and they'll also be playing with pill bugs. They represent HPV 6 and 11, which are associated with 2 major diseases. The first one is laryngeal papillomatosis, or also known as recurrent respiratory papillomatosis, if you're not into the whole brevity thing. This is a condition where tumors, or papillomas, develop in the airway, and it's typically seen in children. So that's why we've got one of these children about to drop a pill bug down his throat. It's thought that children with this disease acquire HPV 6 or 11 during a vaginal birth, and it's not considered a sexually transmitted disease. Also, remember that even though it's the 11-year-old that's dropping this bug down his throat, it can occur in both HPV 6 and 11 strains. Our 6-year-old will illustrate the next disease associated with HPV 6 and 11, which is anogenital warts. And here's a kid about to drop a pill bug down his pants. A fancy word for anogenital warts is often used on the exam, and it's condyloma acuminata. To help you remember this name, we've got a bunch of pill bugs that have accumulated in a jar. So condyloma acuminata is caused by HPV. And do you remember what disease is associated with condyloma lata? That's right, syphilis. So again, HPV 6 and 11 are both associated with laryngeal papillomatosis and anogenital warts. Laryngeal papillomatosis is more often seen in children and is acquired at birth, while anogenital warts is seen in sexually active individuals, and as such is acquired via sexual transmission. Again, we're only using these guys' age to indicate the strain of HPV virus. The age has nothing to do with the population at risk. So let's keep moving down these HPV strains. The next ones you need to remember are HPV 16 and 18. And here we'll draw in 16 and 18-year-old teenagers enjoying a crab dinner. 16-year-old just got his driver's license and has his car keys sitting next to him, and our 18-year-old who just voted for the first time has a sticker on her shoulder. Uh-oh, crabs are never good in the sketchy world. Crabs are a symbol for cancer, and that's because HPV 16 and 18 are just two of several strains of HPV that are known to cause many different types of anogenital squamous cell carcinomas, including cervical, vulvar, vaginal, penile, and anal carcinomas. Notice how I said squamous cell carcinoma? This is because HPV infects squamous cells, which are found obviously on the skin, as well as certain areas of the anus and cervix. Aside from 16 and 18, there are two more strains that may be tested that are associated with squamous cell carcinoma as well, and that's HPV 31. They can be easy to remember with these lovebirds. Let's just say they're saving themselves for marriage 15 years down the line, for when they're 31 and 33 years old. So 16 and 18 are more commonly tested, but if you can remember to add 15 to each of them, as in 15 years down the road, then you'll be able to remember 31 and 33 respectively. Okay, so to represent that these four strains, 16, 18, 31, and 33, can cause anogenital squamous cell carcinoma, we have the crab sitting here on the plate, and we'll also add a pill bug here on the chair. Looks like our 16-year-old's about to sit on him, so he'll end up right in the anogenital region. Since these strains of HPV are spread through sexual contact, condoms and abstinence can prevent infection. Since people are 100% compliant with condoms and generally prefer abstinence, we hardly have any HPV in the US anymore. Yeah, right. But seriously, aside from abstinence and condom use, there is another way to protect patients and their sexual partners. In fact, you may have done this yourself. I'm talking about getting the HPV vaccine, which covers HPV 6, 11, 16, and 18. That means it doesn't cover 31 and 33 as of yet, which isn't the best, but HPV 16 and 18 combined cause approximately 70% of cervical cancers, so it still helps. The vaccine goes by the trade name Gardasil, and it's an inactivated subunit vaccine. Currently, it's recommended for both women and men between the ages 9 through 26, regardless of whether or not they're already sexually active. To help you remember Gardasil, we're going to draw in some syringe-looking spikes onto the fence in the back. Why do we make the syringes precariously on the fence rather than just putting them on the table? Well, first, they look good there, and second, notice how everyone is enclosed in the fenced area except for the 1 and 4-year-old? Well, that's because the vaccine doesn't cover HPV 1 through 4. It also doesn't cover HPV 31 and 33. You can remember that because these two lovebirds' future 31 and 33-year-old cells aren't within the fence either. So there you go. I'm adding a whole nother dimension to these sketches. Time, the fourth dimension. Alright, a little fun fact. HPV is the most common STD. More common than any of those bacterial STDs we discussed earlier, and nearly all sexually active individuals will get HPV at some point. Keep in mind that test makers love to ask about HPV and its connection to cancer. And actually, since this is such an important topic, you'll have to know even more detail. But have no fear. We made it really easy for you to remember. This virus is able to disrupt the regulation of the cell cycle. Recall that the tumor suppressor proteins P53 and RB inhibit the transition from G1 to S phase. HPV encodes two proteins, E6 and E7, which promote the proteolysis of P53 and RB respectively. Since HPV takes out these tumor suppressors, it increases risk of cancer. So to help you remember E6, we have this fork whose prongs look like an E with a shrimp shaped like the number 6. And you have to remember it's associated with the proteolysis of P53, which is denoted by this crab cracker. Why a crab cracker? Because P53 cracks cancer like a crab cracker cracks crabs. Wow, that's hard to say. The red and white stripes are to make it almost look like a railroad crossing or a checkpoint. After all, P53 is a classic guardian of the genome and serves as a checkpoint that can arrest growth by holding the cell cycle at the G1 to S transition point. If we imagine our table is the cell cycle, then the crab cracker is at the threshold of the next part of the cell cycle, which we'll color dark blue. Meanwhile, the E7 protein is symbolized again by another fork with E-shaped prongs, and here's a straw coming out of the root beer bent at an angle to look like a 7. Root beer is to remind you of RB. So E7 and RB are associated. What? Did you see what we did there? So clever. Just picture the straw forming a 7 coming out of a root beer, and you'll never forget E7's associated with RB. Even if you aren't a gunner, you've still memorized it. It's too late. No takebacks. Anyway, RB stands for retinoblastoma protein, and as I said before, it's a tumor suppressor. So again, to tie this all together, HPV breaks down P53 and RB, so infected cells lose the checkpoint that prevents them from moving from G1 to S phase, resulting in uninhibited cell growth leading to neoplasia. Amazing. Although this is sketchy micro and not sketchy path, a key buzz phrase to associate with cervical cancer is a patient who complains of postcoital bleeding, meaning bleeding after sex. Alright, so let's talk about detection and diagnosis. Pap smears have led to a huge decline in cervical cancer, as it's allowed physicians to detect any signs of cervical cancer early. Pap smear was named after Dr. Papanicolaou, who first noticed that cervical cancer cells have distinct features that can be detected under the microscope. So first, to remind you of the pap smear and cervical cancer screening, we have this young woman with a smear across her face, a pap smear. Kinda random, but hopefully you'll already remember pap smears anyway. So the pap smear is a test that samples cervical cells from the area called the transformation zone, where the squamous epithelium from the outer portion of the cervix, or the ectocervix, comes into contact with the columnar epithelium in the inner portion, or the endocervix. These cells are then visualized under the microscope, and the squamous cells that are infected with HPV undergo morphological changes. These distinct cells are called koilocytes and have a characteristically large, dense, and wrinkled nucleus, which may even be binucleate, meaning they have two nuclei within a cell. So to demonstrate these koilocytes, we have a plate of weird-looking, sunny-side-up blue eggs, because this approximately is what the koilocytes look like. Here's a real picture of koilocytes. Aren't blue sunny-side-up eggs the first thing you think about? Alright, lastly, an important risk factor for development of cervical cancer is immunosuppression. In fact, HIV-positive people are particularly at risk, not only because they're immunosuppressed, but also because it's thought that HIV infection enhances HPV's E6 and E7 expression. So, to help you remember this at-risk population, we put this red AIDS awareness ribbon on this girl's shirt to represent an AIDS-defining illness, specifically invasive cervical cancer, but also anal and penile cancers. Now, although she has the AIDS ribbon, she isn't quite old enough to be sporting our classic sketchy symbol, the immunocompromised cane, but if we give her a little foot injury, there we go, it makes the cane a little more reasonable. Alright, so we just covered a lot about HPV, but we definitely made some things really easy for you. So aside from it being a naked, double-stranded DNA virus, we've made it easy to remember that the vaccine only covers 6, 11, 16, and 18, which are the ages of the people within the fenced area. Also, I think we did a really good job of teaching you that E6 and E7 knock out P53 and RB respectively, which leads to uninhibited growth in cancer. It's a lot, but it's easy. I'd say it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Or should I say easy as 6, 11, 16, 18, 31, and 33.